In this presentation, we are all set to solve another example. For this example, a questionnaire has been mailed to a sample of 150 households within 2 weeks after a nuclear mishap occurred in 1979, and one question was asked. Should there have been a full evacuation of the immediate area? So residents were classified according to their distance in miles, their reside from 3 Mile Island, and their opinion on a full evacuation. So as you can see, for full evacuation, we have two answers, yes or no. And based on the distance, I have categorized people into three categories. The people who live 1 to 6 miles, 7 to 12 miles, and more than 13 miles. So these were the values that you see in the table are the number of people in each group. For example, 18 people who answered yes, they are living between 1 to 6 miles of distance from 3 Mile Island, or 15 of people who answered yes, they live in the second category of the distance, and so on. So the question that we are trying to answer is that does a person's opinion about whether a full evacuation was warranted or not depend on the distance a person lives from 3 Mile Island? And we assume that alpha is equal to 5%. So the same as before, we need to provide our H0, H1, calculate test statistic, compare it with critical threshold, and conclude. So what is our H0? Evacuation opinion and distance are independent, whereas H1 is what we wanted to test, is the evacuation opinion and distance lived are dependent. So again, be careful that we always put dependency in H1. So we need to calculate our test statistic. If you remember, we said test statistic is following chi-square distribution. So we said each individual observation minus expected value squared divided by expected value. The final answer is going to be 0.266, but as you can see, I have calculated the values for expected value of each cell and each individual value minus expected value in the cell squared divided by expected value plus all the way for all the cells. I have done this calculation. In the next slide, I just want to show you the details of this calculation and how I have calculated the expected values in each cell. So as you can see, I have calculated the expected values and shown with red. For example, how did I come up with a value of 16.72? It is expected value of row 1, column 1. Row 1 summation is 66 times column 1 summation 38 divided by total number of observation, which is 150. And that is the value that you see over here. 66 times 38 divided by 150. The same thing for example, this cell, 19.04. How do I calculate it? This value is the summation of this row, which is 84, times summation of associated column, 34, divided by total number of observations, 150. Or let's say, I don't know, let's just calculate the value for 34, 32. It's the summation of row 1, which is 66, times summation of column 1 is 78 divided by 78. So once the values of expected amount is calculated per cell, I can calculate my test statistic as you could see in previous slide. It's, for example, 18 minus 16.72 squared divided by 16.72 plus 15 minus 1496 squared divided by 1496 plus all the way until you're done. So we calculated the value for our test statistic, and that is what we got, 0.266. So I need to compare this value with a critical threshold. The critical threshold was chi-square of alpha with the degrees of freedom C-1 times R-1. How many columns did we have? We have 3 columns because we have 3 levels of distance. 3 minus 1 times, how many rows did we have? We have 2 answers, yes or no. So it's 2 minus 1. As a result, the degree of freedom will be equal to 2. I'll go to the chi-square table, read chi-square of 5% and 2, and I will see that the value for the critical threshold will be 5.99. So I need to compare the value for test statistic with the critical threshold. As you can see in this example, this value is the value for your test statistic is not greater than 5.99. So what is your conclusion? As a result, I will fail to reject H null. What does it mean? When I fail to reject H null, it means that I come to the conclusion that evacuation opinion and distance are independent because I am failing to reject H null based on the relationship that I have between my test statistic and critical threshold, because 0.266 was obviously less than the threshold of 5.99, which leads to fail to rejection of H null conclusion.